Bosu of Arucha is one of a number of people who doesn't quite agree with the idea of simply, if you like, amending LI 2462.
Yeah.
They prefer for it to be repealed. Let's find out why. Darryl, good morning to you. Do we have Darryl Bosu on the line?
Yeah.
There you are. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Bye. How about you?
We're great. Thank you very much for asking. Now, we know you're kind of rushing somewhere, so we'll try and make this as quick as possible. So let's get to it.
Yeah.
What would be so wrong with amending a law that doesn't serve our purpose?
Thank you very much, and I think a happy holiday to you as well, and to everyone at Joy.
Thank you.
But I think before I respond to this question, let me take us back to history. So about 25 years ago, mining in Forest Reserve was not the norm. And then due to some administrative challenges or faults, some mining companies were allowed to go and do prospecting. When they did prospecting, the government realized that, look, we can still not allow for mining to continue in our forest, so the prospecting shouldn't have even happened. But considering the fact that these companies spend considerable amount of resources, funds, and investment to get this prospecting done, the government decided that, look, let's allow those really that have viable business cases to have access to some few forest reserves. So when you talk about some of the companies that are currently mining in forest, one of them includes Newmont and Ajinoabepo, which is also one of the issues what the minister has been saying that, look, if we revoke this LI, how are those companies going to be affected? So these few companies were allowed to mine. But to avert future incidents of we having mining in forest again, the government in 2000 came out with an administrative guideline. And those guidelines were very specific to how and what not to do should you want to mine in forest reserves. It also gave clear guidelines on which forest reserves could be mined, which ones could not be mined. And it even gave a limit to how much of an area of a forest you could mine. So to start with, forest reserves that were considered protected forest reserves, which include GSBAs, were prohibited from mining, and also includes hill sanctuaries, culturally sensitive areas, and all of that. All of these areas were prohibited from mining. And aside that, if should you want to mine even in a production forest reserve, so Ghana has got two categories of forest reserves: those ones that are protected, and those ones that are under production. Production means that there's some sort of logging activities going on for the production of timber, or could be explored for other purposes, extractive interest and all of that. So if you look at the protected forest reserves, we have about 30 of them, just 30 of 280, about 280 forest reserves, as we all know. The ministry, government has been talking about the Forest Commission. We have about 280 forest reserves. Out of these 280, 30 of them are protected. The rest are somewhat under production. So for the 30, which constitute 10%, you are not supposed to touch them, as the law and the guideline used to be. But fast forward 2022, our government passed a law very nicodemously, without involving industry players, sector players, and NGOs and all of that stakeholders, passed a law that allows for mining in protected forest reserves as well as production forest reserves. And even with the production forest reserve, there was no limit as against the previous guideline, which had in place a limit of about 2% of the total area of oil production areas. So this new LI 2462, first of all, took away all protections that protected forest reserves had. It also removed every limitation that anyone who perchance is given a mining concession should adhere to. And then finally, it prioritized the mining permit over social environmental permits. For example, the forest entry permit, the water resource permit, and an environmental permit. but rather it plays getting a mining concession as a first option, which makes it very difficult for anybody at the EPA or at the Forestry Commission to say no. Because if the minister himself has given a company a mining concession, who are you at the gate, forest gate, to say no? So these were the issues with the LI 2462. Now, going forward, we've been campaigning and speaking to government, and not only the current government, but also the previous government. We went through a very tumultuous period of where we engaged government, state agencies, parliament, to the extent that during last year, almost in the lead up to the election, government agreed, look, let's repeal this LI. And the current administration was with us, supported us all the way, and even made several commitments to that effect. And the reason why this LI was really a point of contention and why we were very strong on the fact that it must go was that if you don't revoke this LI, you are first of all perpetuating an injustice in relation to the making of laws in this country, and also an injustice to future generations, in the sense that all forest reserves, which provides significant services to both young and old, and even to future generations, were going to be destroyed in the wake of Ghana's mining pool. And that is why we're very strong on the fact that the LI must go. Now, as you know, the previous government took steps to really lead the process of revoking the entire LI, except for the challenges of Parliament being frustrated and the dissolution issues. That process could not conclude. So we move into a new government in 2025. We expected His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, his government, to really commit to what they promised and to do right by the citizens, only for us to wake up and hear one day that, look, the intention is not to revoke the LI, but really to amend. And if you look at the fact that an amendment is, and this, if you look at the fact this amendment is only looking at giving back the protection for the 10%. Now, that would mean that every other forest reserve, the 10% is about 30 of them. So you can say that effectively the rest of the 250 forest reserves are going to be open to mining. And this is where the problem is. So we are saying that, look, we need to protect not only the 10%, but also allow for protection of all other forest reserves, and even reinstitute a limit should we in the future even have a consideration to mine any forest reserve for purposes that we know might be needful should there be a need.
Right. Now, what the current government is proposing is, is to amend the LI in such a way that the power that currently sits with the president is taken away from him. Would that not be helpful?
Well, let me make something very clear. That has never been a problem. That particular provision in the LI already acknowledged that GSBA and some of those protected forest reserves are already prohibited for mining. But should the president want to, but that still relates to the 10% of the forest reserve. So right now the president is saying, before the LI gave him permission to not only target protected forest and production forest, it also allowed him now to say, look, I'm not going to allow the mining in those 10%. So you have your 10%. But the question is, what about the rest of the forest reserve? That's why we're saying that if you amend, you are only saving 10% of Ghana's forest reserve, which is just about 30 out of 280 forest reserves. What about the rest of the 250? That is why we need to go into the entire law, look at all those provisions that are not sustainable for sustainable forest management in this country, and remove all of them. The best way to deal with it, looking at other challenges of even the limited fines and the fees that relates to the LI, will mean that we are better off actually getting rid of this LI than amending a small portion of it. This amendment will only save 10% of Ghana's forest reserve, while the rest of the 250 are open for mining at the whims and caprices of the president or of the government in power. And we have seen how the previous administration abuse that power. We cannot allow that to continue going on into the future.
Now, Dario, there are people who argue that mining is essential. A lot of the things we need for the devices we use, even the phone you are speaking on, has some gold in it, and so it's inevitable that we would have to farm mine in forest reserves. Can we rather look at strategies put together, like Newmont is mining in a forest reserve right now, and they have a strategy to reclaim, do land reclamation, replant forests, and all those things? Can we rather look at that and say that because we need the gold, we should allow people to go into these reserves, but must have a strategy to replant them and to regrow them? Is that a possibility?
I mean, we completely agree that mining is important to every economy, and nobody has said mining shouldn't happen. I think that is one point. But in doing that and going to mine, as a country, we need to set for ourselves boundaries and limitations. Forest reserves, as you all know, are also essential assets that provide all of us with water, several goods and services. And I can tell you, almost all the water treatment stations in this country take their sources of water from a forest reserve. If we are therefore going to allow for these forest reserves that are providing immense goods and services to be destroyed because we think we need gold that we're already getting from areas outside the forest, but for the bad management of our minerals and the poor governance within the mining and minerals regime, we shouldn't be doing what we are doing to ourselves. We shouldn't be going to critical areas that are also important for Ghana's socio-economic development. And that's why we are saying that if Ghana must mine, that's okay. But we need to be very clear and set clear boundaries and protect social and environmental safeguards, because they are also as equally important as the gold that is needed for all the things that you said. So, yes, it's possible to mine in forest reserve, but we need to have boundaries and we need to have limitations. We cannot set a law that only allows 10% of our forest reserves to be protected, while the rest are left naked to the use and utilization and abuse by government officials who want to do mining as they want. And as we have seen, we saw how in the last 8 years of Ghana's development, the mining boom really led to the massive forest destruction and water pollution across the country. So I think as a country, we need to see how we can balance our mining with other socioeconomic needs. You can never replace a forest with tree planting when you have mowed it down for mining. It's never the same. The best you can come to is to establish a plantation. You can never restore a forest, a natural forest, to what it used to be before. And if you listen to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama in one of his speeches during the campaign period, talked about the fact that these trees, these forests, have lived for several years, for generations. And it shouldn't be our time that we'll sit and watch for them to be destroyed for money that we want for within a 4-year term. I think we need to be thinking more intergenerational and thinking about balancing our socioeconomic development with also not only just the gold, but also with other essential environmental services that the forests and the water bodies provide. So, I mean, nobody stops us from mining, and nobody is saying we shouldn't mine, but we need to do it right. So far, legislations like LI 2462 is not one that is going to take us to that path of sustainability when it comes to mining. And that is why, even though we need mining, we need all the gold, we need the minerals, we need to repeal LI 2462 and usher in a new regulation that makes it more stringent, put some limitations on how much of a forest that you can even mine, clearly set ourselves boundaries which says which areas are clearly prohibited and which areas we can accommodate, but to a certain level of strict practices of environmental compliance. If we don't do that, we cannot give ourselves the excuse that let's cut down our forest for mining and then replant. It's never possible, and there's no justification to do that.
Now, Daryl, I know that this new amendment will be taking effect very soon. You have about, let's say, less than 2 weeks for it to take effect. What are you doing, the CSO's platform, to ensure that it doesn't get passed? What help do you need from Ghanaians? And if it goes through, what will be the alternative for you?
Thank you, Kojo. I think one thing we have started doing right now is that we sent a memo to the Parliament Subsidiary Committee. We've also sent a petition to His Excellency the President, copying the Minister of Lands and all of that. We have now a petition online that we are asking all Ghanaians to sign on. We need to amplify the momentum and get Ghanaians to understand that, yes, we need the gold, but we also need to secure our forest reserve for other important services. And what you can do is to support the campaign online. We are actually talking to a lot of people of influence, people of power within the political circles, to try and get the parliamentarians to listen and annul the current amendment process. So we need all citizens on board, and we are going to very soon have a petition van going around your various communities, and we are inviting everybody to sign on. So it is very, very important. Whatever you can do, if you can speak to a politician, if you can speak to your constituency representative and anyone in power, if you are connected to the office of the president, please put in a word and let the presidency reason and stick and also keep his promise of repealing this LI, because that was his campaign promise. And he even committed to that when he was swearing in the Honorable Minister of Lands, Honorable Emmanuel Amabua. So we need to see this repeal happen and not rather an amendment. And we'll appreciate all the support we can get from the media and from all Ghanaians at large, both in Ghana and abroad.
Okay, thank you, Daryl, for talking to us this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We'll be following the conversation on this, and we hope that together we can push for the right thing to be done for Ghana.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about here. Try and remember what was promised you. Okay, when the NDC was campaigning for your vote, what did they promise you? What did they say they would do about these forest reserves? What did they say they would do about LI 2462? And how does it compare to what they are proposing to do now? Do you feel that it's a promise fulfilled, or do you feel that they need to do more? All right, the one person they will listen to is you. So make your voice heard.